Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts. Hey there, true believers. Andy Nelson here from the Marvel Movie Minute podcast with the rest of the team.
Pete Wright, Kyle Olson,
Rob Cabasco,
and Matthew Fox.
This is the podcast where we dissect the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time, exploring every detail of this epic superhero franchise.
From the nods to the comics to the electrifying performances, we've had a blast diving into every aspect of the MCU. Right from the start, we're talking about them having to earn their wizards. And I think we've made a good argument that they do.
We have our favorite recurring bits, like 5 stars for Spar, because every character deserves their moment in the spotlight.
Ooh, Kyle, speaking of spotlights, did you know that the term advertisement actually comes from the Latin advertere, meaning to turn toward? That's exactly the kind of fascinating detail we love to uncover on the show.
But it's not all trivia and recurring bits. We also dive deep into the ethical dilemmas our heroes face. Loki alone provides enough material for a whole season on superhero morality. Not to mention that I can't wait till we get to Civil War.
In our season looking at Iron Man 3, we're going to mix things up a bit.
That's right, Rob and I are your guides, but instead of our usual minute-by-minute format, we dive into 5 minutes of the film in each weekly episode.
It's a totally new approach, but one that still allows us to explore all the depth and detail that makes these movies so special, even if Iron Man 3 isn't all that special.
Hold on, that's where you're wrong. Extremist, Shane Black.
Yeah, would you like to look at the Mandarin and Maya Hansen? Mm-hmm.
So whether you're a die-hard Marvel fan or just love deep dives into movies, there's something for everyone on Marvel Movie Minute.
Suit up and join us on this epic audio adventure. You can find us at truestory.fm or by searching Marvel Movie Minute on your favorite podcatcher.
Because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, every minute is packed with excitement.
Enough said.
I hope you like mustard. Bye.
Ever wonder where the devil got his horns?
How about those cloven hooves?
Or that pitchfork?
Wasn't he an angel?
No, he was a snake.
No, he's the great red dragon.
No, he's the beast.
He's the prince of this world.
Prince of darkness.
Well, he's the prince of dark.
Good morning, star lovelies. One of my names is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I sometimes go by Keenan Diaz.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, The Devil's Details. What comes to mind when I say Lucifer?
How about Satan?
What about just the devil? How did the big bad of the Western world end up with so many faces? Join us as we dig up, decipher, and deconstruct the devil's many forms throughout history.
Take a guided tour with Dante through the 9 circles of hell.
Or revisit Satan's angsty bad boy years in Paradise Lost.
Learn the ins and outs of a Faustian contract.
Easier than a 1099, but with a hell of a lot more fine print.
Slither on over to The Devil's Details on True Story FM and join us in the diabolic discussion.
Love and hisses. Mwah! Didn't Al Pacino play him in a movie?
Are you sure that wasn't Robert De
I could
Niro?
have sworn it was Tim Curry.
That was Elizabeth
Didn't
Hurley.
he go down to Georgia at some point?
You better watch out. You better
Not watch out. You better not cry.
Thank you. You better watch out. You better not cry. I'm telling you why, because The Rock is coming to get you. Friends, we're talking about Santa Claus and The Rock and J.K. Simmons and working out a lot because random fat phobia. We are talking about the movie Red One. It's going to be myself, Matthew, here, your host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, along with Pete Wright, host of the Film Board Podcast. We're kind of doing a joint presentation. In other words, I said, hey, can anybody talk to me about Red One? Pete went, Red One? Is that really worth watching? Okay, sure. And I dragooned him into being on this podcast with me. So, Pete, how's the dragooned party? How do you feel?
Let's just say your invitation was essentially, hey, this movie's terrible. Come talk about it with me on a podcast. I don't know why I said yes, but I did. And I am here and I am thrilled to be here.
I described my feeling about this movie as the cinematic equivalent of, oh my God, this smells so bad. Here, smell this. And I think you're on because over the many generations, many millions of people have said, okay, I will smell this. I will have this highly unpleasant experience. Except you decided, except for 2 seconds of olfactory torture, you would engage in 95 minutes of cinematic torture.
Yes. And here's the thing. This is what may come as a surprise. I watched this with my wife and daughter, and they both were all smiles throughout this movie.
Okay.
And I have to say, like, the surprise was when they would look over at me and say, why am I having fun at this movie? This movie has no right to make me smile like this. Why am I smiling like this? And
That's fair.
that, I think, is the illusion of Red One that
Mm.
actually makes it play. And so I know we have several different sort of angles we want to approach with this movie,
Yeah.
and so I'll cede my points until later, but
We'll
it's
get to that.
interesting.
But I
Yeah.
do want to say you've presented a very interesting experience where you, the great cinephile, have said that they were all smiles. How do
You
how
caught that, right?
how do you, Mr. Pete Wright, are you going to admit on national podcast, international podcast heard all around the world by
Yeah.
at least 500 people? What did you think of the movie?
I liked it more than you did. How about
Okay,
that?
that's
That
fair. That's
if
fair.
you are the bar, I crested it a bit.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. So, for those who've been living under a rock, this is the movie that stars The Rock and Chris Evans. Didn't even mean to do that. The Rock is just ubiquitous, like rock.
This is
Um,
fascinatingly, they make Chris Evans look small.
yes. So the premise of the movie is that in what I think is actually a really interesting bit of folklore and world building that I would be behind if it got its own show without The Rock in it, that there's kind of a Torchwood-like organization, a secret organization that is tasked with the protection of mythological beings. And that one of those mythological beings that's tasked with protecting is Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, as he is known to the rest of us, or just Red One, as is his code name.
Mhm.
And The Rock is an entity. His name is Cam, I think, Canyon, something like that.
Oh, he's Callum.
Cal.
Drift. Yeah.
Callum Rift. Which is
Drift. Yeah.
which sounds like a name that would only be found in a 1990s video game or being played by The Rock.
Yep.
And he is preternaturally old. We're never actually told why, whether that's because he lives at the North Pole where people age differently or what.
They
But
do imply he's not human.
they imply he's not human. He's clearly not the size of an elf, and we do see elves the size of Christmas elves, as they're often portrayed. So who knows what he is? But he wants to retire. He wants to return to a normal life. And why is that? Because there's just too many people on the naughty list these days, and he's not seeing things in humanity that make him want to do his job.
Right.
And Santa Claus, in a horrifically anti-labor message, spends most of the movie trying to convince him that he doesn't get to go have his own life, but that he should spend his life working for the capitalist establishment that is Santa. So first problem there. But he also reminds him that, of course, it is their job to visit every boy and girl on Christmas Eve around the world. Second problem, which we'll discuss in a moment, because newsflash, there are non-Christian boys and girls somewhere in the world.
Nobody told the movie, Matthew.
Or even agnostic ones who don't celebrate Christmas, atheists, whatever it is. Anyway, unbiased plot summary that someone else would give, but I wouldn't give. So we then find out that Chris Evans, who is both the very best at his job, but also a down on his luck ne'er-do-well, have fun squaring that circle, is very, very good at finding people. And he's able to pierce the protections of the dome of secrecy that they have around Red One and the North Pole. But of course, he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't believe in the North Pole or anything like that. He only just knows that he's had a kid for a number of years, which I'm not even going to get into my problems with that. I'll get to that later.
Okay.
So the point of all this being that he's not really a good guy. He's a level 4 naughty lister, but when Santa Claus is kidnapped, he's the only one they can bring in. And so him and The Rock go on adventures where they fight lots of CGI nonsense, and they encounter Krampus. And actually, Krampus is portrayed kind of awesomely in a way that I really like. And it turns out the villain behind this is someone you wouldn't have thought was the villain. And it's all about a plot to stop having Santa, because Santa is too nice and rewards too many people for being nice, and that's not okay. And the bad people should be punished. So this is sort of like if Batman took over Santa Claus, except, a very bad version of Batman.
Right. And I don't even think the movie's ideology is that the Santa shouldn't exist. It's just that Santa doesn't punish the naughty listers. We need to have balance between the two. We're going to punish the bad people forever at the hands of the Christmas witch, and we need Santa's juju to do it.
Now, of course, part of the whole point of this is that Santa is a mythological being. and thus most people don't believe in Santa.
Right.
Pete, you have children, I believe.
Yeah.
You also don't seem like a Grinch, so I have to imagine that your children, I think you've said you're at least Christian in some form or another, that your children got gifts under a Christmas tree at some point in time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm guessing that you and your spouse or whoever it was provided you put those gifts under the tree, and then other people helped put them there under.
Yes. Yes.
So
All of that is. This is a grueling line of interrogation.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry it's personal, but I had
That's
to make
good.
sure I established it to
No, it's
make
good.
you the everyman on the street to
I
ask
am.
this question.
I am that. Yeah.
If presents had magically appeared after you had gone to sleep while visions of sugar plums danced in your heads
Mm-hmm.
and you'd woken up and there were more presents out there,
Mm-hmm.
would you believe in Santa Claus?
I would check the locks on my doors.
But if
Right.
everyone at the PTA said, "Oh yeah, we had the
Yeah.
same thing
Did you
happen."
get your delivery? Yeah. There's a certain there's a certain degree of just sort of separating my personal experience from the
Mhm.
microculture that we've created in our home and with our family around how we handle the spirit of generosity at Christmas time. Um, that I have to separate because this movie would be an antagonist to that microculture, and so I try to look at these all of the Christmas movies really that have this sort of vibe where
Uh-huh.
a red suited man breaks into your home and leaves stuff.
Yeah.
It's just part of the you know I say heavy air quotes ancient tradition and mysticism
Mhm.
that is the commercial Christmas industry. And as many problems as I have with that, how well does the movie execute on that mysticism in like playing the hits in kind of a new way
Uh-huh.
is the question for this movie.
Mhm. I guess that's part of why I asked it because I thought it did that spectacularly badly. That's honestly one of my
Mhm.
biggest problems in the movie, in part because excuse me, the circle of people who don't live at the North Pole, but who are aware of the existence of Santa Claus is expanded dramatically in this movie.
Right.
Among other things, one of the first things we see is that it's the real Santa Claus at a mall. And yeah, sure, he's pretending to be the fake Santa who's the real Santa. It's very Miracle on
Yeah.
34th Street. I'm fine with that. But
I
then
actually thought that was clever. I thought that
yeah,
was fun.
it was a nice way of tying it into a long tradition of
Yeah.
Christmas movies. But then as he's leaving, this entity that I think we can agree that there's now a secular American holiday called Christmas. And
Yes, for sure.
it is for the most part divorced from the religious holiday that many Christians such as myself celebrate. And there's a lot of people who are non-Christian, I think, who don't like the fact that there's a secular American holiday that is directly derived and uses the iconography of a Christian holiday. And that's
Mhm.
part of what we'll discuss in a moment. But even as fairly secularized, the fact that it is still the origin of it is the birth of a Prince of Peace, I feel like should in some way be a little bit of discussion when Santa Claus is escorted by two fighter jets armed with missiles of the
Yes.
United States Air Force.
Yes.
Because
Hallelujah. Amen.
now the pilots know that Santa exists.
Yeah.
The flight controllers know that Santa exists.
Oh, the circle of awareness is broad in
Right?
this movie. Many the international world leaders know that Santa exists. There is no
Mhm.
question that Santa exists. That's the sort of table stakes of the film.
I guess that's sort of my point because I think you're right. Most Santa films have that degree of disbelief, of suspension of belief, that you're
Yes.
willing to say, actually, if Santa was real, that would mean every parent of a child who celebrates Christmas in the world would know that Santa was real. And the world would be a very different place because of it, and probably
Yeah.
would not be a mythological being. It would be like, the super post office once a year.
The super post office. Yes.
And most movies are allowing me to suspend that disbelief, but I feel like this movie, by trying to make it more realistic, by trying to say, like, here's here's the group of humans that work for this, here's the politics around, it just shattered the disbelief for me.
I think that I get where you're going, and I think the thing that I struggle with is that in order to make it more realistic, they have to introduce bureaucracy to the Christmas industrial complex,
Yes.
right?
Yes, they do.
And that becomes a challenge because that runs headlong into personal and cultural belief systems around, as you say, the birth of the Prince of Peace.
Mhm.
So this movie presumes that the only people who are who don't understand Santa are the people who once believed and then lost that belief somehow. And
Right.
Jack, in Chris Evans, is the character that is sort of our avatar for that.
Mhm.
That the in between, like the people who ideologically don't even have a Santa in their belief system, are completely ignored. That's a
Yeah.
thing that the movie decided we're not even going to pay any attention to that. This movie is for the believers and the people who don't believe anymore that we're trying to bring back. And they talk about our numbers are down
Mhm.
year over year. Like that level of bureaucracy, I think, just runs headlong into the peace and generosity thing.
And I would say that leads to perhaps my second biggest problem with this movie, which is how aggressively it universalizes the idea of Santa. And
Yes.
because I would say it actually, what you said of it just ignores, I don't think it ignores. There are a couple of times where, like, one direct statement is that Santa is able to visit every child on Earth, which I think is probably a great surprise to a lot of Hindu children and Buddhist children and other
Yeah.
children who don't
Yeah.
celebrate Christmas.
Well, I will say
Um,
I'll correct that statement. It presumes all children of all nationalities are of the same ideology.
right, right.
Yeah.
Which,
That's the false
yeah.
presumption.
And even when it gets to, like, all these world leaders who are like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen?"
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna guess that the president of India and the president of China
Yeah.
and other places where Christianity is a small minority are not terribly troubled by the
Yeah.
idea that Santa Claus is not gonna exist.
Right. Right. And so to have this secret sort of underground teleportation system that brings you from a toy store in New York to a toy store in Bangalore
Mhm.
is maybe not a thing that would be welcomed by
I
the industrial state.
I would also say that as someone who has been a part of, working in game stores for a while and been in therefore in email contact with a lot of very remote game store owners
Mhm.
who have great problems getting product to their store. If
Yes,
a
right.
store in New York could simply shove a box through the closet, and let it appear in Bangalore,
Yeah,
I think that would save a lot of problems.
that would save a lot of problems. So all of those things are are a bit troublesome
Mhm.
when you stop and like really interrogate the movie and the movie's purported belief system,
Right.
and then we get to the the sort of retribution for past sins.
Yeah.
I
So,
imagined as I was watching it that that's a part you would have a significant challenge with.
honestly, I'm still on the universalizing of Christmas. I just wanna
Okay.
say one or two other things on that, and then we will get to that, I promise.
Yeah.
I think for me, the other reason why I find it so problematic is if this was about a Chinese holiday, a Chinese New Year
Mhm.
or something like that, I would feel very because the thing is, this movie doesn't exist in a cultural context where the idea of pushing Christmas onto people who don't want to celebrate Christmas is just fine and dandy.
Mhm.
We live in a world in which people on social media believe there is quite literally a war on Christmas and are therefore fighting a war against non-Christmas.
Mhm.
And and so all of that I think just added to why I was like, this is just not a fun movie or a good movie, as well as all of its breaking the suspension of disbelief. And I just wanted to add one more thing, and I promise we'll get off the soapbox and go on to other. Did you see the movie Noelle, spelled Noelle?
Yes, with, Bill Hader and Anna Kendrick.
Yes, it's one of many, many Santa movies that you've made, that you've seen. I don't know how many you've made.
Sure.
But you reference the fact that there's many, many, and it's
Mhm.
not the best by any means, but it's cute and has some nice points.
Sure.
But it deals with this issue so much better in a 3-second scene that just I want to remember because it shows why it can be so different. Because in the movie, the idea is that there's sort of a new Santa of every generation, and this time, why can't it be a girl? I think it's somewhat hereditary, and like the daughter of Santa or something like that. I don't remember, but this woman Noelle becomes Santa Claus, Anna Kendrick, and it's
Mhm.
great. And she has some problems and foibles, like your classic first day on the job, no one believes in me kind of stuff. Fun movie.
Mhm.
And there's one scene where she's still figuring out exactly what homes to go to. She goes down a chimney and finds a family that is playing dreidel and is very clearly very Jewish.
Right.
And she just says to them, "Oh, sorry, wrong house." And they all kind of smile and nod and maybe offer her some socks or something, and then she goes about her way.
Yeah.
To me, that is now kind of, to me, the bar of just what I want a Santa Claus movie to meet. Is just like, because I guess that showed that you can have a very fun Santa Claus movie without having to say that every single child in the world celebrates Christmas.
Yes. Right. And I think this movie, any of that nuanced sort of even 3-second sequences
Mhm.
would have gotten so in the way of the marvelization of Christmas that is this movie,
Uh-huh.
that I don't think they could have made time for it. I just don't even think it crossed the minds of the filmmakers to approach with that sensibility. I mean, at
Yeah.
no point did I feel like there was any generosity of spirit to these other,
Yeah.
holiday worldviews.
Mhm. I think it's very well told. And I'm just gonna say, for all those who are conspiracy nuts who say Jews control Hollywood, watch this movie because
Yeah,
it's a
no,
real sign they don't.
right,
Um,
right.
so tell me more. I love that phrase you just used, though. What do you mean by the marvelization? Because I know you don't mean making marvelous. You mean making like Marvel, the MCU.
Oh, yeah, marvelization. Well, I mean, look at who you have. You have Captain America, you have what's his name?
Black
Not
Adam.
Shazam, Black Adam. You have these heroes of like hero screen,
Mhm.
and what else are you going to do with them in this kind of movie? This is, I think, the we have these characters and we have a holiday. What can we do with them? What if Captain America and Black Adam were in a movie together and we just wanted to throw a parade of pixels at the
Mhm.
audience? This is what you would get.
Yeah.
And it is a $250 million Christmas movie. That is the most absurd statement we can make about this movie. It's
B-
absurd.
Born in a manger because they were so poor. You're correct.
Yeah,
It goes on to.
right? Right. Like, this is not a story that needed to be told. If I never see massive alpha snowmen on a beach again, I'll be okay.
Because it was a movie that was very much about saving Christmas to save the kids, and that kids have the innocence and that they're still on the nice
Yeah.
list, and that's why Callum should continue to be a wage slave in the industrial capitalism that is known as the North Pole. um, but it's also then aggressively not a kids movie.
Yes.
Like, there's cursing, which is fine, but like there's a moment where they're on the beach in Antigua, as you said, because that's where they go to fight the snowmen.
Hmm.
And we get a couple scenes of women walking by in the kind of bikinis that people often wear, in which a lot of butt cheek is exposed.
Sure.
And I just felt like, yeah, it's the marvelization, because it's a way of being like, no, we don't want parents to bring their 8-year-olds. We want 14-year-olds to come to this movie on their own
Yeah.
and
We
tell
want-
mom, "Oh, mom, I'm going to a Santa Claus movie. It's fine."
Yeah.
Oh, look at the butt cheeks on that woman.
Well, and the fact that this movie, I mean, it even in theatrically, I think it's just about $175 million box office on a $250 million budget, but now it's on Amazon, right?
Mhm.
Now it's a draw for subscriptions, and it's
Right.
a parade of shopping and products, and
Mhm.
so we'll never know how it truly fares, but now it's available for everyone. Now it's
Yeah.
available for the kids who just want to see The Rock, and
Right.
in the movie. So, is that a neutral good in the world? I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know.
It's hard to say. It's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one who's like, back off with those sexist ideas of what kind of bikinis people should wear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it just seems so. It's not even that, as you said, this movie lacks generosity of spirit. It just feels like such a cynical cash grab. The inclusion of stuff like that, or like
Mhm.
having curse words very specifically in a like, look, we're an adult movie, we can have curse words. It just felt like I don't know. It was all the reasons I was like, there's nothing about the spirit of anything in this movie except capitalism and commercialism, which I guess is what Christmas is today. So that's probably fair.
That's your secular holiday, right? That's
Yeah.
the secular holiday of Christmas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not quite the holiday of the generosity that you were talking about.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So let's get into the retribution and punishment of it all. First of all, I'll ask, have you seen the movie Krampus, or have you seen other things about the story of Krampus?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Say a little bit more about that, because this was the first time I was seeing a Krampus on screen.
Uh, the Krampus movie is so you haven't seen the movie Krampus?
I have not.
Okay. The Krampus movie, it was fascinating because it portrays the relationship with Krampus as a generational horror, as a thing that haunts
Mhm.
families for their past ills.
Yep.
And it's a horrifying creature. It was a horror movie, and it comes with minions in the forest, and it was a deeply scary generational trauma processing experience.
Mhm.
And so I don't have like I haven't done any sort of scholarship on Krampus as a
Mhm.
historical you know creature, but I do have a sense of what they were trying to go for here. And the fact that it ends up being a parade of essentially like Clive Barker's Nightbreed characters,
Mhm.
I thought was eh, low key fantastic. Like that part of the movie I thought was pretty fun.
Yeah. So in the movie, we learn that Krampus is Santa's brother. They were adopted, but they're no
Mhm.
longer speaking with each other. And it used to be that the two of them were partners on Christmas, and that Krampus was the one who came up with the whole idea of the naughty list, because Santa just wanted to bring gifts and presents to everybody. Um, there's a whole Christian debate over universalism and two different schools of that, which I won't even get into. But that, like, you can kind of do an interesting thing on the theology of those two.
Yes.
But that somewhere along the line they had a falling out, and that Santa still keeps the naughty list to some extent, but that for the most part, Krampus now has his own area that is just him and him alone and hits his people. And honestly, it looks kind of fun. Like, they just party all the time. They're basically like scary looking Vikings. Like,
Yeah.
they party and they drink and they play games where people get hurt and maybe occasionally die, but everyone's kind of in on the joke and enjoying it. And the fear is that when Santa is kidnapped, that it must be them. And so our heroes go and invade this world in breaking the treaty that was made between Krampus and Santa, that neither one would ever enter the land of the other. Again, making me like, give me a Torchwood style show about this mythological organization. I'm here for it,
Yes.
especially if you don't just do Western mythology. I'm so all over it.
Mhm.
Give me an Easter bunny who's not Hugh Jackman, please.
Yeah, and they
Um,
even tease it with the Headless Horseman. Like, I thought that was a
yeah.
really nice little nod.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that scene felt straight out of an episode of Torchwood,
it
or
did.
any of the other many
Torchwood,
shows.
Warehouse 13, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And with Ming-Na Wen as the person who's the head of it,
Of
which
course.
she's fantastic,
Natural. Yeah.
sure. Um, but it winds up that, like, yes, they seem to believe in more retribution, and I have definitely some thoughts of that, but I appreciate that he's not presented as evil, and that, forgive spoilers, we eventually learn that he is not the reason why this all happened, and that he helps Santa fight the actual villain,
Right.
who does seem to have much more of a, like, everyone is naughty, we're just going to assume that, and we're going to, like, it's not that naughty means you're not going to get gifts, which I think is all Krampus ever wanted, but that naughty means you're going to get full on retribution and punishment, and we're going to punish everyone with the same hammer.
In the
So
form of isolation for the rest of eternity
right.
in a snow
And
globe.
if you told a little fib about your sister, or if you
Mhm.
murdered 10 people,
Right.
same thing, you're isolated for all of eternity.
Well, and what they're robbing there is not just like it's not just individual punishment, it's the theft of community, which is the soul of this sort of holiday experience, right?
Right.
It's that we come together, and this presumes to take away togetherness from so many. So it becomes a punishment not just for the people who are put into snow globes, but a punishment for the world.
Right.
She goes around saying we're going to make the world a nicer place, but everybody's being taken from someone,
Right.
and that is a setup for massive unsettling grief.
And I think that was part of why, like, I think it was hard for me to get that, because I was so angry about all the other stuff from earlier
Yeah,
on.
right,
But as
right.
you talk about it, you remind me, yeah, that makes sense, because that actually is, I think I once heard someone say, like, everything about Christmas comes down to, do you see it as a holiday of giving or a holiday of getting?
Yeah.
And I really love that idea, because, yeah, it's about like, is the joy in finding gifts and giving gifts to others, or is the joy in the kind of like, I want to get all the gifts? And
Mhm.
I'm not going to blame an 8-year-old for being materialistic, but I think that, like, whether secular or not, gift giving holidays of all sorts can be a way of helping kids through that, and like my mom would always tell me before my birthday, she'd be like, yes, you're going to get a lot of gifts today, but remember today, eh, eh, you know the happiness that you feel from the gifts you're giving, keep that in mind every time we're going to go shopping because you're going to little Johnny's birthday party,
Mhm.
because that's the joy you're giving them.
Right.
And Christmas is my mother's favorite holiday, and I cannot help but associate with her. And I think that it's so funny that so much of the other parts of the movie don't get this, because I do think you're right. The the meaning of that, the theology of it, the philosophy of it is very much what Christmas should be all about. It's the coming together of people.
Yeah. Right. Right. And I think the movie it spends so much time on the pixel parade
Mhm.
that it is easy, to your point, to get lost in the multiple messages that feel like are sort of shoehorned in when you're standing in a forest of ideological sort of
Right.
fortitude.
So, and where what did you think of Krampus as sort of the one kind of standing in the middle of these two?
Well, as always with these characters, I like the presentation of him, that he's less of a horrific monster in present. He is a monster in presentation, right? The many
Mhm.
horned Krampus. He's giant. He is presented as he's almost a Loki character, right?
Mhm.
He's playful. They're playing a game called Krampus Schlapp, which I found low key delightful. Like, that just seems like a thing that would be fun. And I'm one of the people that absolutely loved, like, Mary Slapsmith on How I Met Your Mother.
Mhm.
That was like, I don't know why I have such an affinity for slapping games, but I
Yeah.
saw this and I thought this is really fun. And then he is presented as the savior at the end, but also the ex of the Christmas witch, right? That
Right.
they had a deeper relationship, and I thought, "Okay, now this is Santa Barbara. Now this has gone a
Yep.
bridge too far," right? Like,
This is CW
yeah,
doing the Santa
we
mythology world.
what are we doing here? This was an example of people writing themselves into a corner as a game to see if they could write their way out and not really being able to do it. And
Yeah.
so we have to do a lot of hand waving to get to the end.
Which
Uh,
I will say is one of my other, like, a small little issue, but actually that I think is a much bigger thing. Um, Fat phobia is a part of our world, and certainly is a big, big issue in cinema. And like, it's so brave of an actor or actress to gain weight in order to play a part. And J.K. Simmons is an interesting choice for Santa, and is generally not seen as a fat, jolly old man. And they make a point of this. Like, he doesn't even wear a fat suit when he is the Santa in the mall. And then they make a point later to show him working out and to show how important it's not just that he's buff, it's that they have kind of like that training scene where him and The Rock are like lifting weights together.
mhm.
What was your take on that? Like, why was that in there, and what did it mean to be in there?
Okay, my first thought was this is, and I should say I'm a huge fan of J.K. Simmons. He
Yeah, me
is
too.
principal
Amazing actor.
in my top favorite movie, in my top 4 on Letterboxd, Whiplash. I adore J.K. Simmons. I think
He's the best J. Jonah Jameson I think we're ever gonna
yes.
get.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Uh, I my first thought was, this is an interesting exercise in ego, that
Mhm.
we're gonna take a guy, and those pictures of him training for this movie leaked a long time ago, right? He has been working to get cut for a long time, and I wonder how much of this was, I do it, right? Can
Mm.
I be a different kind of Santa in a way that tests my own personal, ability to shred?
Right.
And that was my first thought, that this was an exercise in ego. I did not consider this as a hyper reactionary approach to fat phobia, uh, until you look at the rest of the movie and realize this is again, I have to fall back to Marvelization, right?
Mhm.
Marvel is the same aesthetic, right?
Right.
We don't get any of the characters that are alternate bodied are not heroes,
Right.
right? And that's this movie. And look, the alternate bodied characters who are not heroes are elves that are the more of the sort of fairy tale elves. They are
Hmm.
in their own way compared to Santa and family. They are grotesqueries in
Yeah.
this film.
And and I think that's a really good way to put it. And everything I'm gonna say is I don't think this was intentional in the slightest. But I think it's one more way that they were sort of like, let's pick up any parts of the Santa mythos that we want without any consideration for what the choices we're making means.
Yes.
Because there is a reason why Santa is portrayed as fat and jolly.
Mhm.
And you can go very deep in like human sociology and psychology that like, originally like you wanted to be fat in the winter because there was less food, and unless you consumed the fat you had you would die.
Yeah,
And if you were thin on November 1st you were not living to March 1st,
right.
like
And
the
that's one
fat.
thing we can guarantee, this Santa was cold AF a
Yes.
lot.
Yeah. And that's not an issue. And
Mm-mm.
but also I think there is something about, and here again I am going to draw on the Christian themes of it, but I think it applies even as it becomes secular. One of the bases of Christmas, which is also the basis of the winter solstice that a lot of it is drawn from. It's also the basis of Hanukkah. It's the basis of a lot of different cultures' middle of the winter holiday. Is that in the middle of the winter, when resources are at their scarcest, we think we have to hoard our resources, that there's not gonna be enough for us. And
Yes.
so the idea of celebrating generosity and of giving to others is very intentional at a time when you should be keeping it all for yourself. And for my mother, that was one of the most essential things, and like, yes, diet culture is not healthy in the slightest, but also like obesity can be a real thing. Like, I'm not even
Mhm.
gonna touch all that, but I know there's a lot of different sides. But like, my mother's biggest adage was there's no diets on Christmas. Like,
Yeah.
Christmas is abundance. Christmas is eat what you want, enjoy what you want. All the little things that say, "Oh, I'm gonna feel guilty for eating that," or "I'm gonna feel guilty for playing this game instead of working." Like, none of that exists on Christmas.
Mhm.
And to me, the fat, jolly Santa Claus is the living representation of so much of that.
Yeah. I think there's a there so I agree with all of that, and I think
Mhm,
in my core, that aligns with my belief system. If I take a step back and just look at the movie and J.K. Simmons' portrayal in the film,
mhm,
um, I enjoy the swing that they take with the character,
mhm,
right? I enjoy the presentation of him. There are certain shots that I think are illuminating to the character of Santa and the joy that this Santa gets in doing the job
mhm.
in this film. The close up with the super wide, like a 12 millimeter lens, where he's in, we just get his face with the goggles and he's in like sleigh warp,
Yep.
uh, is delightful. Like
Agreed.
there's
Yeah.
just no doubt it is a delightful and exuberant expression of the role that he plays in this universe. So
Mhm.
there are these moments in this film that I think actually sell the message of that we're talking about with this portrayal of Santa but it's hard. I think the challenge is reconciling that
Yeah.
with what it's saying to the marvelization of our holiday.
Yeah. And I think I think that's fair, and I'm not against that. Like, I'm not saying they needed to put J.K. Simmons in a fat suit or
Yeah.
hire a larger actor. There's a whole other ethical questions about fat suits. I'm not
Yes.
even gonna get into that. I think you could have had him and even have him looking very buff and just not comment on it. It was the
Yeah.
fact that they made a big deal of it and showed him working out and all that, where I was like, Are you gonna leave us
So
anything about Santa? Like,
what do
come on."
you okay, but devil's advocate, he's with The Rock, right? Like there
Mhm.
is some comedy, I think, some intended comedy of having him say, "Okay, let's go heavy." Like he is the star of the gym while
Right.
standing next to The Rock, who is objectively a fortress
Mhm.
of a human being.
You know who are some of the biggest weightlifters in the world? People with beer guts.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can
Oh,
be
for sure.
incredibly strong and incredibly good at those things
Yes.
without having, washboard abs or whatever it is.
Absolutely, but that's what I mean, like, the joke has to exist with the performers that we have,
Mhm.
and Hollywood has said The Rock is an example of a fortress,
Right.
right? And J.K. Simmons next to this, you would just
Mhm.
never expect him to do that. So I sort of feel like, we're separating the art from the artists. I kind of applaud J.K. Simmons for taking on the role
Mhm.
for as little as he's in it. He's not actually in the movie all that much.
No, he's the MacGuffin much more than
Yeah,
he's a protagonist.
for sure. And there's a lot about okay. Let's talk just briefly about
Uh-huh.
Chris Evans and the setup that they give us for this role. That Chris Evans is, as you said in your opening, he's the guy who can find anyone. He is useless in this movie, right?
Right.
He is underskilled. He's constantly talking about how he's never done this before. Why did we need him in this movie? Were it not for the spectacle of putting Chris Evans next to The Rock. Like, his part was weirdly underwritten for this film.
Oh, see, I think part of this may be I just don't like The Rock. I don't find The Rock
Yeah.
entertaining. I am always like, for me, Vin Diesel and The Rock have kind of had similar career paths, except that Vin Diesel has always been in the shadow of The Rock. And I will forever think that's the fault. That's the best sign of the failure of big Hollywood, because I think
Mhm.
Vin Diesel is just an amazingly better actor, much better looking, and frankly doesn't have all the nonsense in the contract that The Rock does of he always has to be the hero, and which
Well, and
is
look at
part of
what
what
this
ruined Black Adam, and we have a whole
Yeah,
podcast about that you can go check out.
of course, and look at the legacy of this movie will forever be that The Rock cost this movie an extra $50 million for
Mhm.
his craziness, his tardiness, his shenanigans.
And so there's a part of me that's like, if Hollywood had a naughty list and wasn't just putting everyone on the night list, at some point wouldn't say someone say to The Rock, "You're not worth the money." Um, but even so, take it back to what you were saying. I think this goes to a larger question of filmmaking, which is, what is your responsibility in telling an original story versus picking up pieces that have a lot of meaning to other people and telling your version of a story with them?
Mhm.
Because if you gave me a story about J.K. Simmons as a completely fictionalized, not Santa being that still was a better weightlifter than The Rock and Chris Evans and The Rock, and told us all of that outside of the realm of a Santa story, I'm totally fine with it. I'm not going to watch it because I'm not going to enjoy it. But if it makes
Mhm.
$200 million or $500 million, sure, I'm glad people had fun with that, and I might
Sure.
actually see it because I love Chris Evans so much. Though his acting talent, as you said, was horribly underused in this. But when you pick up the mantle of Santa, which does have a lot of meaning for people and probably should be parodied more. And like if this was actually just full on skewering Santa, and it was about like a labor rights fight at the um North Pole, and it was that he worked out all the time, but he wears a fat suit when he goes out. Like, I would love that. Give
Yeah.
me that any day.
Well, for instance, what's your perspective on Arthur Christmas, right? Arthur Christmas does a change of hands in an animated format, but it does approach some big swings about the nature of Christmas and what the symbols mean.
Nice.
I think I
I,
think it's
I
fascinating.
yeah, I haven't seen that, but I'm sure it is. I
Yeah.
just mean like it's fine to take a symbol and take it in a new way,
Mhm.
but have some respect for what the symbol originally means, even if you're disagreeing with that.
Right.
And it just felt like the whole like body thing, in a world where people are just told again and again, you shouldn't eat so much at Christmas because look at your weight or this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. Um, so yeah, it's a small thing, but I think it's why it kind of an oversized feeling for me.
Yeah. No,
Which
I
is an
hear it.
unfortunate way to phrase that. But um last thing I'll say is I do think there is one important aspect to Chris Evans's character, even if I think the whole thing with him and his son was ridiculously schlocky and over the top. But I think it's supposed that to me, the failure of the Christmas witch ideology is once you do a naughty thing, you are forever on the naughty list.
Yes.
And it's the most troped story in all of Hollywood. But the idea that a person who is bad can become good, I think that's the role Chris Evans's character plays more than anything else in the movie. And he does a fine job of that.
Yeah, and the ultimately the message of the movie is that every moment is a moment of to choose to do good,
Right.
right? And I like that message. Like everything that we're talking about, that's sort of a seed that is good for humanity,
Yeah.
right? Let's do more of that.
Yeah.
So there are pieces in here that I think are good. I have to ask you, like with all that is frustrating about this movie, Can you give me something you legitimately liked about it?
Yeah, Krampus. I thought
Oh,
the portrayal of
Krampus was
Krampus
it.
was awesome. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good. So we're definitely in the bag on Krampus.
yeah. I mean, I
Krampus
think
was
it
great.
is. This is
Portrayed
not.
well.
This is not the worst movie I've ever seen. It is
Yep.
probably the worst Christmas movie I've ever seen, and the one that made me angriest. But
Yeah.
it's got something redeeming.
Okay. We have Bonnie Hunt
Mhm.
was one of those. It was felt stunt casty to me for some reason. She's a
Mhm.
face that a lot of people know, especially coming from Sabrina and or not Sabrina.
Right.
Anyway, she's just a comic face that I think a lot of people know. She was great. Lucy
I sh
Liu.
I've the best
Yeah.
comment I saw is that she was doing her best January Jones impression,
Yeah.
which January Jones is the character from the X-Men
Yep.
who and that this actress played Sally Draper. January Jones was played by Sally Draper's mother. So
Oh,
that's kind of
yeah,
fitting that she's, like, doing that. But
for
yes, go
sure.
on.
Lucy Liu was interesting to see her again. Um, an interesting casting choice, and I think she plays the Ming Na
Oh,
Wen.
I said Ming-Na Wen and I meant Lucy Liu. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
that was horribly
but
wrong of me.
well, that's why I brought it up because I think she and Ming Na Wen have a corner on authoritative Asian women in film and TV,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
that's fair.
so she did great. Nick Kroll, where do you
Who's
stand on Nick Kroll?
who's that?
Nick Kroll is he was the protected by the Carmanians on the beach. He was the
Oh, yes,
main
is the
guy.
guy who's often been like, he comes from The League,
He
which
comes
is
from the league.
a web show about and
He's a
he's
stand-up, and it is the league is, and I admit I am a huge fan of the league. I
oh, yeah, I
watched
love it.
every episode. It's a very very funny show. It is completely foul-mouthed and
Mhm.
I loved it. He is a stand-up. He is a consummate creator, and I think a genuinely funny guy. I always have an interesting kind of relationship when I see him in films that aren't that.
Yeah.
Right? Right? He's a bit of a sore thumb.
Yeah, and I think the thing is he's playing himself. He's playing
Mhm.
the same role he always plays, and I've seen that a million times. What I haven't seen is a grown-up Sally Draper,
Yes.
and we learn very quickly that it is Sally Draper. Tell me the actress's name again.
Bonnie Hunt?
Bonnie Hunt, thank you. That it is Bonnie Hunt speaking through him, and we get
Oh,
every now and then we get Bonnie Hunt speaking through him.
no, that was the I'm sorry, we're crossing names. Bonnie Hunt was Mrs. Claus.
Okay,
It was, uh, Kiernan Shipka
Kieran Shipka, thank you.
as Grilla.
Grilla, okay, thank you. So, I may have confused things before earlier when I was talking about that, but, like, yeah,
Mhm.
to me, knowing that it could be her saying all these lines and instead it's coming through his mouth, I was just annoyed. I
Yeah.
was just like, "You've got a much better choice there. Why not just" it could be his face and he makes very humorous faces, but why
Yeah.
not make it her voice?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because he's such I think your point is well taken, that this was a Nick Kroll performance, and
Mhm,
it very much felt like, "Hey, we know Nick Kroll, he's a friend of ours. We're shooting for a day, come on in."
right.
Right, there
Well, and I think that it very much fits the audience they're going because if what they're going for is teenage boys,
Yep,
which it seems a lot of the
that's
ways
Nick
they are,
Kroll. Yep.
that's who he very much is an audience for.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think as a again, if I separate myself from the undercurrent of ideological consternation that I
Mhm.
bring to it, I was smiling during more of this movie than I was not. Mostly because, as I call it, the Pixel Parade, I thought was fun. I
Mm.
enjoyed just the visual depiction of the North Pole. I enjoy the slides. I enjoy
Yeah.
in particular, I always enjoy. I think this is the depiction of Santa delivering presents is a fascinating thing in film and television.
Mhm.
And I liked the choices they made in that montage at the end. It just was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun going through the cooking vents and, like, answering questions that everybody says, "How does Santa do all this?" And they tried to include some new swings. Here's
Mhm.
how Santa does these things in, condos and buildings and things that don't have chimneys. And so there were things in this movie that they tried that I do think work. So it's like you said, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's
Yeah.
absolutely not. It is a middling to fair popcorn movie that requires, I think, especially for younger people, a little bit of discussion.
Yeah. And I would say for me, I think it's probably in my worst 5 movies of all time. Like, I did think it
All
was truly
time.
bad. And I would part of that's because I think I just didn't find joy in those things that
Yeah.
you did, and I don't, and it may be because I do have very strong feelings about Christmas, and I think part of that's religious, part of that has nothing to do with religion.
Mhm.
It's just about the like, my mother loving it so much, my loving the family aspect and all that, but also I don't find The Rock enjoyable. I don't find I've seen the CGI snowmen stuff,
Yeah.
not actual snowmen, but I've seen CGI monsters so much. Like, I don't really like Marvel stuff anymore. I started a podcast called Superhero Ethics because I
Yeah.
loved the MCU, and I've not liking it being so CGI'd. So yeah, I think it's great. And I wanted to know more about why someone would enjoy this movie, and so that's awesome. And I don't think it's good or bad. It's just different tastes.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, for sure. And here's the biggest question of these movies that get released at this time of year is does it become an annual staple?
yeah,
And I can say with s- out qualification, this is not an annual staple
yeah,
at all. It's a one and done, and it's fine because I got to go watch Spirited.
yeah. Well, so if you want to know what are our annual staples, you should become a member because we're going to talk about that for just a few minutes in our bonus member content. You become a member for only $5 a month or $55 a year. All the information is on our show notes. You get bonus episodes, bonus content, ad-free content. If you want to listen to a highly commercialized movie without commercials, that's the way to do it. And of course, this being the holidays, you can even give someone a gift of a membership. And not only can you give someone a gift of a membership by and also help out this podcast, you could give them a gift of an Audible subscription. Do you listen to books on tape, Pete?
Yes,
Ebooks?
exhaustively,
Yeah, like it's just you're doing the dishes, you're on a drive. I find it
100%.
so much easier to consume media that way. You can give a gift of an Audible subscription through our podcast. Again, the link is in the show notes. And like, okay, for if you have a kid in your life, have you watched that kid pick up a roll of unwrapped wrapping paper or even wrapped wrapping paper and hit people with it and go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh? They're not pretending it's a sword. They're pretending it's a lightsaber. What if you could get them an actual lightsaber that lights up and makes noises and is good in a fight? If you want to use it for like martial arts fighting, you can do all that at Level Up Lightsabers. Link is in our show notes. I'm trying to demonstrate to Pete that I'm doing a good job of inserting these ads all through the episode, and so I did a terrible job of leaving them all to the end of the episode. But please help me look good in the eyes of Pete by bigging up those numbers. Become a member, buy an Audible subscription, buy a lightsaber. But whatever you do, remember, we have spoken.
You're a role model for others.